Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to IHW 770. It's a course we call Holism as for short, but the full title of it is Holism, or as a guiding principle for leadership and well-being. My name is Tom Lenz. I will be your host over the next 8 weeks. Maybe it's better to call me a cruise director or a guide, I'm not sure. Welcome to the course, and I'm excited to have you here. Out of all the courses that I teach in the program, I think this is the top of the heap favorite, and maybe it's just because I got to mold this thing in a way that I feel like it makes sense, and hopefully you enjoy it too as we make our way through the course, and I guess more so hopefully it's valuable to you both, I think personally and professionally. At least that's my goal anyway. I think it's a good idea to start just introducing myself, so you kind of get an idea of what you got yourself into signing up for this course. It's for many of you, this is an elective course, so you kind of had a choice here. So hopefully you don't regret that choice as you keep going through the course. But I think it's a good place to start, is giving you an idea who I am. So I think that helps when we start talking about some of these concepts, so you know how this is developed and I think where it's heading, maybe even more importantly from my perspective. But so my name is Tom Lenz, and you can certainly call me Tom. You can call me Dr. Lenz, Professor Lenz, whatever you feel comfortable with. I usually tell people that I prefer Tom at the graduate level. So if you feel comfortable with that, that works for me too. But I've been at Creighton for, this is my 34th year on campus. I came as an undergraduate student in 1988, and I've never left. How about that? I grew up in a small town in Iowa called Carroll. It's about 2 hours to the north and east of Omaha. Great place to grow up, but I found a new home, I think, when I got to Omaha and to Creighton, and it seems like a great fit and never wanted to leave. Of course, I met my bride many years ago here. I think this will be I know this is going to be our 30th year anniversary of being married, so don't tell her I said I think. Her name is Nancy. We have 4 kids. 2 of them are girls and married. The other 2 boys are still in high school. We always say it's God's little sense of humor that he gave us a little split between the 2. It was kind of like hey, try this parenting thing over again. See if you can do it with boys and maybe get it right this time. I'm not sure. To be determined, I think. I've been at Creighton, a long time, and when I came to Creighton as an undergraduate student, I studied exercise science, and then had an opportunity to stay in a graduate assistant-like position when I went to graduate school over at University of Nebraska, Omaha. And then when I finished that, I went to pharmacy school at Creighton. Because I wanted more patient contact and wanted more direct medical and healthcare system focus to my career, and it seemed to be a really, really good fit, even though I think for many folks it's hard to see the 2 working together even still today. But looking at disease prevention by way of lifestyle behaviors in the pharmacy practice world is such a great fit. Not something we'll really talk about in this class, but so after pharmacy school, I did a 2-year fellowship in cardiovascular research in the School of Medicine at Creighton, and then was hired on by the pharmacy practice department and had a practice site for about 6 years in Lincoln, Nebraska, at a hospital doing inpatient cardiology from a pharmacy perspective. So working mostly with heart attack, people who have heart attack, heart failure, and various other cardiovascular issues. So I did with that for about 6 years, and then an opportunity to come back to campus for an administrative position. So I took that, but then needed to find a practice site, and that's sort of where my as Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story rolled forward relative to my interest in disease prevention, chronic disease prevention in particular. And so when I got back to campus, I helped develop a new program for our employees that at the time we called the Cardiovascular and Diabetes Risk Reduction Program. Terrible name, but it said exactly what we were doing in that program, and we have since renamed it to the Lifestyle Medicine Clinic at Creighton University. And that program still rolls on today, but as worked with that in that administrative position with that practice in the Lifestyle Medicine Clinic for about 8 years or so. There was an opportunity from the university level to develop new programming that came down from the president's office for disease prevention programs. That helped both our undergraduate students and our graduate students matriculate into our health sciences, but also to create new programming that would kind of augment the healthcare industry in this whole idea of disease prevention. And so that's when we started what we have now is this program here, the Integrative Health and Wellness Master's Program. We have also an undergraduate program called Healthy Lifestyle Management, and I get to direct both of those programs, as well as an off-site program that we've got in North Omaha focused on wellness and disease prevention. It's a food pharmacy program where we work with community, low-income members of the community who have diabetes, and we use food as medicine for them to augment their current care. So it really ties in nicely with everything we're doing in the program. Kind of fast forwarding, as you can kind of see my trajectory of career trajectory, it certainly wasn't straight, but I think it all sort of has lined up to come, to where we are now, and I think ever evolving. But it kind of brings forth the question: so what's the deal with the wholeness thing, and why this course, and why the focus on wholeness? Well, I think for me, when I started studying this, it was 30 plus years ago, 34 years ago, when I came to campus as an undergraduate student, looking at what wellness is. It wasn't something I was familiar with up to that point, and certainly you couldn't even find a definition for it in the dictionary at the time of what wellness was back in the late 80s. It's really evolved since then, and now we tend to use language like well-being instead of wellness to, I think, still try to get our arms around what this is. What makes more sense to me now, I think over the years, it's become a little more clear over the last, I would say maybe 5 years or so, that I like to use the language of wholeness to describe what this means, I think more so than looking at wellness or well-being. And hopefully that will become clear as we make our way through the next 8 weeks of this course, and why that is, and why I feel like this is really an important thing for both leadership and for personal health and wellness and well-being. And so for this course, it's an elective course in the Integrative Health and Wellness Program, but it's a required course in some of the other programs. We have a concentration or a graduate certificate in leadership and well-being, and this is one of the courses required for that. But it's also an elective course in the Master of Science in Organizational Leadership as well. So we have a mix of students that are in this class that are in various programming there, and for some people it's an elective, for some people it's a requirement. So thank you, first of all, for signing up and coming into the course. We've got 17 students in the course, so 18 making me. I'm a perpetual student, so I count myself as a student with you, even though I'm your cruise director here. So why does this make sense for leadership? So the first week, we're gonna, and I'm gonna make a separate video for each week to introduce each week's topic. And so I'll go into more detail there for the first week, because we're gonna dive into what holism means. relative to leadership, relative to personal well-being. But once you start seeing the world outside of our individualism bubble, then we start seeing things differently, and it's hard for us to unsee them. I think from a leadership perspective, this is an important topic because it helps to guide our way forward in leading other people, leading programs, whomever you're leading, students, employees, organizational structure, however it works for you, seeing perspective from the whole outside, rather than the individual small view that we tend to focus on, is a much, I think gives a great deal of clarity. And one of the things that we will realize is that there's wholeness inside of wholeness, that's inside of wholeness. And there are patterns to life, I think, that we will hopefully be able to recognize as we make our way through the course, that these patterns of wholeness and holism exist everywhere. And it gives us this idea of the grandness of all that is. And so to be an effective leader, if we can see this grandness outside of this myopic view that we typically tend to see things through, I think it makes us a better leader. From a personal health perspective, it is an absolute necessary piece to be able to manage our personal health in a way that makes sense to me through stress. So a great deal of my research over the last 10 years is focused on chronic stress and chronic stress management, particularly for people who work in the healthcare field. But seeing the world through a ever increasing perspective of wholeness and holism gives so much different perspective on stress. And we're going to dive into this, and I know much of what I'm saying now sounds like I'm talking in circles, and it really is, I feel like, too. So I'm trying to be general without giving too much into the details and the weeds of what we're going to uncover here as we go through the course. But putting these pieces together, I think, has great importance: leadership and personal health and well-being, and looking at both through the same perspective of wholeness. Because let me just use one example. For instance, within organizations, and you can take any organization, it doesn't matter how small or how big, from a small company to a large institution. People are struggling with personal health and well-being, but they're also struggling it from a corporate health and well-being side. So it's not just a personal issue. This is also a very much broadened corporate institutional issue for health and wellness and well-being and stress. And so what we have tended to do as solutions over the last, couple decades for sure, maybe as long as at least I've been studying this, so three plus decades, is either look at this from a perspective of saying, well, let's just take obesity for an example. If you're overweight, then it's a personal issue for you, and you need to solve this problem, through your own personal health behaviors. And so that's one camp that we've, and that's the majority of what the focus has been for health and wellness issues. So you can use any of them. You can use heart disease, any type of chronic disease, stress, anxiety, depression. You just go down the line. Most of our focus has been on the individual side of fixing the problem from the individual perspective, right? But then there's also another perspective here too, and part of the story here that I guess I forgot to mention is a number of years ago I went back and got after I did my fellowship in cardiovascular research. It was a few years later, I went back to school again and got a master's in medical anthropology. And the purpose for that was to get this broader perspective of the structural issues that affect health. Because what I was seeing in our cardiovascular and diabetes risk reduction program was that people were trying really hard to do the right thing, trying to go to the grocery store and eat right, trying to exercise, trying to get enough sleep, and on down the line. But for instance, they go to the grocery store, and that is just a hotbed for making bad decisions. And purposefully so, because it's structured in a way, grocery store meaning, it's structured in a way to get you to track through the store in a way that gets you to buy certain items that have a higher return for the food seller. So people are in the business to sell food, not to make you healthy, and so it's a business. And there are, there's the marketing that goes into the products that are on the shelves and where they're placed and where they're positioned on the shelf and in the store have a lot of impact on our choices and what goes in our cart. And so there's a structural issue there that affects our ability to be healthy, and one that we feel like we aren't necessarily in control of. And so here's the other camp. We've got this structural issues that we're trying to deal with relative to being healthy, and we've also got the personal side of things of making right choices and being able to do what we feel like is healthy. And so most of the strategies in the past have been one or the other, and almost where people say you have to be on one side or the other. And that is simply not the case. If we want to be healthy, we've got to address both. And that's a perspective from wholeness. So it takes real leadership to be able to recognize all of the components that go into, say, the health of your employees. So from an institutional level, and just looking at the healthcare institution, which is a very challenging, we have a process that doesn't work very efficiently, and it's really expensive, and the people who are working within that are really stressed, and so there's a lot of pieces in there that are need to be looked at from a structural side. But then also when you get down to the person themselves, there's some interior work that needs to happen also. It's a both and conversation. And so as a leader, as someone interested in health and wellness, either or both together, it's important to look at it from the whole. And so that's the purpose of this course, is to look at issues from the whole, regardless of what your positioning is, regardless of what your job is, or what your focus, your discipline is. It may be, we've got people in this class that are all over the board on what they do for a job. And so what I'm hoping to do in this class is to say, it doesn't matter. This focus from a whole perspective can really help guide you in what you do for your work. So that's the idea of this, and I think one of the things you're going to find is that we can't really talk about this unless we talk about spirituality. That you just can't uncouple it, and so we're going to I think use a lot of God language in the class, and I hope you're okay with that. And whatever you call God is okay. Some people like to refer to God as the divine or the great light, the great spirit. There are many names, and however that makes sense to you, it makes sense for me too. And so you can just choose whatever language makes sense for you. I'll tend to use God language, using God and God language as we go through this. But at the same time, I'm hoping to frame this in a way that looks like spirituality is embedded everywhere, and so that we don't necessarily have to use God language to even know what we mean through that. So we can't talk about the whole and wholeness unless we bring in spirituality into the conversation. So that'll be part of what we're going to do. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the logistics. I'm already up to 20 minutes. My wife Nancy says you must get paid by the minute because you say way too many words. Pay by the word. She always says you get paid by the word. Say, good joke, honey, but I wish I did. And I'd say more. But anyway, so I tend to say a lot of words and ramble on, so I apologize for that. We're already up to 20, and I'm going to kind of go through this with some bit of clarity for you, the syllabus, without taking quite too much time here. What I would encourage you to do out of the gate is to read the syllabus. There's a tab on Blue Line that you can get to the actual paper copy, the Word doc copy of the syllabus, and I would encourage you to read that. That is always more clear to me than it is what you're looking at on Blue Line in all of the different sections. And why is that? That's because that's my document, and that's why it's clear to me, but that's why I put it together in that order that seems to make sense to follow as a student or somebody going through the course. Sometimes when it's chunked out into Blue Line, it seems like it loses a bit of cohesiveness to me. So if you want to see it all in one document, it's 19 pages. I know it sounds a ridiculous amount, and it really is. So I wouldn't encourage you to print it off because it's a lot of paper there. But if it makes sense to you to do that, that work, I think that's a good way to go. I always like the paper copy of things. So anyway, I'm going to go through the syllabus just at a high level here, because each week when we go through this, I'm going to give more introduction and clarity through videos like this. So I think it's a good idea to read through the course description. It's extended there to kind of give you an idea of what we're getting ourselves into here and what the description and the philosophy is of this particular course. But so to get into this a little bit more detailed, there are 4 books that are required for the course. And you're going to say, dude, this is a lot of reading. And I'm going to say, dude, you're right, this is kind of a lot of reading. But I think one of the things that seems to be consistent here is that I know some of this reading, you're going to read it once and you're going to say, what in the world did I just read? Particularly what we're going to do in the first week. I know you're going to look back at me and say, I think I made a wrong choice, and why did I choose this course? This was really ridiculous. Stick with me, okay? Because this is going to be not necessarily an introduction into holism and into wholeness. This first week, this is going to be like, bang, crash course. Because what I'm going to introduce you to is Ilia Delio, and she is absolutely one of the finest writers and I would say academicians, but also spiritual leaders relative to wholeness. And she has done so much work in this space, and I'm gonna ask you to read a good part of her book that she calls A Hunger for Wholeness. It's a really heady read, meaning that it's kind of hard to get through. I think I've read that book about 25 times because it really, there's so much to it that I need to reread it and reread it and reread it. So you're not gonna have time, I don't think, to do that in the first week. But get through it the best you can. Okay, so that's my advice to you. But the other part is what I did in Blue Line is you'll see a link to a video that she does on this particular book. And actually, it was in reverse. She was a lecturer on an invited lecturer on this topic, and they turned that lecture into this book. So the book goes into a little more detail than the lecture, but the lecture is about 120 minutes long. It's a YouTube link there. I would really encourage you to watch it. Maybe watch it before you start reading, because it'll give you an idea what you're gonna read. But you'll quickly realize that this is really academically, have some academic rigor and intensity to it. The way she writes sometimes is difficult. You got to read it a few times. But she is so on point with wholeness, and has done so much great work in this space. And she actually has a podcast too, that if you're interested to looking at that. But the link that I sent you for the video will actually get you to this where she works as the Center for Christogenesis. She's actually a professor at Villanova, but she runs this center out of DC. So anyway, that's where we're going to start. It's not an introduction. It's like boom. It's going to be right at you, and it's going to be hard to get through. But bear with me, because the next read it's considerably easier, because the next read is one of these. So it's a book that I read, that I wrote. I've written a few books in my career so far. This one, I think, is far different than the others that I've read. It's a fairly easy read. It's not very long. It's called Chronically American. It's our evolution towards chronic illness. And then at the end, it's a bit of a how do we get out of this mess? And so we're going to spend actually 2 weeks on that. So I promise you, the rigor of the writing gets easier to read, because I don't write like that. So hopefully that goes. I think that'll go better for you there. The other thing I should say is there's a follow-up to that book that I'm writing now called Posturing Towards Wholeness. And I'm hoping to have it finished by the end of this class. But I don't know if I'll get there, but I'm certainly going to interject pieces of that book as we go through, probably in videos like this. I also have 2 other books. These guys are great. So if you haven't read anything by Jim Martin, he's a Jesuit. He is the bomb. This guy is so good as a writer and a speaker. But part of this course is gonna ask you to read his book, Becoming Who You Are. And then we're also going to read Vic Strecker's book, Life on Purpose. He's at University of Michigan. Just a fantastic speaker and author, and his work has been focused, a lot of his work anyway, in the last decade or so has been focused on your life purpose. So that's another really good read. A couple of the other things to get through here before I wrap this up is, as far as our assignments go, as you'll see, we have discussions each of the 8 weeks. And that makes up a big chunk of your points. The biggest piece of your point value for this course comes from reflection papers. There are 6 of them. They are about 3 pages long, and so the first 6 weeks you'll write a paper, a reflection paper of a minimum of 3 pages, and that, as you will see, probably makes up the greatest piece of work for this class outside of the reading, is that particular writing each week. So gear yourself up for a little bit of that writing. This is kind of a reading, writing type course. And then, of course, the discussions each week there. So between the 2 of those assignments, that's a majority of your points there. We have 3 other assignments. One will be for you to develop a personal purpose statement. It's not a paper. It's just a statement. When we get to that, I'll share what mine is with you. But it's essentially a sentence, but it takes a bit of thought for you to be able to put that down. So there's some reflection that goes into that. In addition to that, you will write what your guiding principles are. Again, not a paper, but more of a statement. And then you will write a research critique paper at the end. We'll talk more about that later. But that's an attempt in the last couple weeks of this course to put some application into this. So it's okay, I've learned all this stuff, so now what? And hopefully when you walk away from this course, that you'll have really some tools, I think, to lean back on, at least planting some seeds, if not anything else, for you to help you move forward, whatever your position is. But I think it's a really good idea to keep in mind, and I hope this comes across in class, is that this isn't just a professional preparation course. This is also personal. You can't uncouple the 2. You are your job, and your job is you. That's the way we are. It's part of our life. It's part of the whole. Where we work, we spend so much time there that it is part of us. And so even though we need to compartmentalize and make sure that, we're staying balanced in life, how our philosophies work at work is how they work in our personal life too, at home. And so how we do anything is how we do everything. And I think that makes sense for this course. So hopefully this is as much of a personal development course for you as it is a professional development course. So, two other things. I'm glad I had a list here to look at. We will have, even though this is an asynchronous course, I'm going to put optional Zoom sessions in so we can do some chit chat on a live way. So I'll send you on a separate communication what those dates are. I'll record those and you can watch them later if the time doesn't work out for you. They're not required, so you're not going to get points for being there. This is let's get together and talk about what we're talking about on an asynchronous way in a live chat. And then I think lastly is, how do you get a hold of me? I think the best way to get a hold of me is through email. So send me a direct email to the easiest way is through my Creighton address, as opposed to sending it through the Blue Line communication, although I will get either. It's a little easier for me if you send it to my Creighton email address, which is on the syllabus, but it's tlenz@creighton.edu. So pretty easy to remember. So thank you again for being here and for sticking with this almost 32-minute video. Wow, this is a record for me, I think. So look for more videos to introduce each of the 8 weeks, and then perhaps even more so than that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and let me know. All right, everybody, looking forward to our work together, our journey together over the next 8 weeks. See ya.